Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 4 of the Creative Romania podcast. Joining us today is a good friend and also Romania's urban storyteller, Cristi, aka RAIDENBUCHAREST. Am I saying it right? Is it Raiden or Raiden Bucharest?
It's RAIDENBUCHAREST, and thank you for having me, Andy. It's a real pleasure to be here and just to share some, let's say, urban storytelling with your audience.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you do here in Romania.
Well, I'm a former corporate employee turned urban storyteller to, let's say, chase my dream to document and promote Bucharest through all available channels, meeting people directly or through social media, all kinds of social media, through my photography art, etc. It started all the way back in 2007 when I was invited to participate in a blog documenting Bucharest called The Urban Resistance. And that's where it all began, basically. So I evolved and slowly discovering the city more and more, discovering more areas. And I wanted to tell people about what I found. So I started a Flickr page, for example, a Flickr account. And yeah, wow, that's a throwback. That's a throwback. And yeah, I used to put my pictures on there and they are still there, but I haven't posted on Flickr since in forever. But then of course I switched to Facebook pages, and then to Instagram, to my current account, RAIDENBUCHAREST, which you mentioned. I haven't done YouTube yet, so I'm not a vlogger yet, but I like to communicate with the press, with the media, in order to disseminate the information, visual or spoken, to as many people as possible. So basically it's giving out urban culture, but real urban culture, not some kind of urban culture wannabe, which we can see in the how can I call it? What authorities are doing, what local authorities are doing.
Mainstream urban culture.
Yes.
What's being promoted for a particular agenda. Your agenda, you have no agenda. You're pretty much just telling the story of the city, and in a sense, it's a transfer of information experience. Because if you haven't seen this page, each photo has a description and a story behind it. And how did you come to find out these stories? Like, where is this coming from? Is it from people? Is it from things that you've read? Is it from? I imagine it's a lot of different sources.
Well, of course, multiple sources. So I initially started out with what could be found on the Romanian internet, on the Bucharest internet back in the mid-2000s. So not a lot. And I said, okay, this will not do. So I started investigating on my own, going out into the field, talking to people. I enjoyed, in my student years, I enjoyed talking to really old people in old buildings because they had lived there.
That's interesting.
During their whole lifetime. So they knew the story of the building and of that particular place. Yeah. So it was quite an experience to gather the information from a direct source, let's say. Then, of course, discussing with subject matter experts, historians, architects, urban planners, even old journalists who had documented the city back in the communist times, exploring archives, national archives, the archives of Bucharest City Hall. Yeah. So accessing all kinds of documents, all kinds of photo archives, all kinds of maps or plans of the city to better understand the whole concept. Then I can say foreign archives, pictures of Bucharest which are not here in Romania.
A lot of the architects were foreign that build, especially the early era of Bucharest. I mean, there's a lot of French influence. There's a lot of, I guess, Eastern influence as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes, early phases of what we now call modern Bucharest or contemporary Bucharest can be traced back to the late 19th century, let's say. Romanian architects were not educated that much. So up until there was a whole generation which was educated in Paris, in Berlin, in Vienna, great capitals of Europe. Yeah. They let foreign architects come to Bucharest and build some of the most historic and iconic palaces that we have in the city to date. And it's, of course, mainly the Belle Epoque style, neoclassical, French neoclassical, maybe some Italian neoclassical, but still very beautiful architecture. Mm-hmm. And from the early 1900s on into the 1910s, and then moving on in the post-World War I era, Romanian architects started being the majority. So they were building Bucharest in the interbellum period, as it is called.
Now, were they these Romanian architects? Were they attended school abroad? I'm assuming
many of them, yes.
Yeah.
But then the architecture school, what we now call the University for Architecture, was formed in Bucharest. So basically, they could study here. Of course, they had foreign professors. They had professors which had been taught locally. But basically, the Romanian School of Architecture produced a local style, which you were referring to as an Eastern influence, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on this, but I do walk around a lot. I'm fascinated by especially older architecture. And I'm fascinated by the similarities you see here in Bucharest, as opposed to other parts of Romania, to Eastern, to kind of a Turkish, Ottoman style, but also with the way the windows are shaped, the Brâncovenesque style. I find that very beautiful, very appealing. But then you look over and you do see something that looks like it would belong in France, or it's very interesting. It's a mishmash of different cultures and styles.
And that Brâncovenesque style, which you mentioned, is actually what I call the local national style. We usually call it Neo-Romanian because it's based on Brâncovenesque. Brâncovenesque was a few centuries ago. So they draw elements from that time period and insert them into mainly civil architecture, because Brâncovenesque style belonged to churches, monasteries, convents of the Eastern Orthodox religion.
So you told me about the windows and how they represent the Holy Trinity.
Usually, yes. While looking at Neo-Romanian style buildings mainly from the 1920s and 1930s, we can see the number 3 pattern.
Yes.
So the number 3 is everywhere: 3 windows, 3 ornaments, 3 whatever you want. So basically, it's a code symbolizing the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost.
And once I became aware of that, I started noticing it everywhere, and I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. This is fascinating.
The signs have always been there.
That's very true, very true, and they still are.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course. Even nowadays, and even let's say if the buildings are in a poorer state than they maybe used to be back in the day.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Is Romania doing what's Romania doing exactly to restore these buildings?
Well, most restoration is done by private enterprises or private individuals. The state is not yet fully committed to that project because it takes expertise, it takes a lot of money, and especially now with the current pandemic raging on, it's a bit difficult to focus on that field specifically. But even before the pandemic, it's my opinion that the state was not fully hands-on and was not fully involved in restoring and consolidating old buildings. Maybe those listening to us don't know that Bucharest is located in a high-risk seismic area.
Yeah.
So statistically speaking, every 40 to 50 years, we have a big earthquake, something over 7.0 degrees on the Richter scale.
Yeah.
The last big one was in 1977, 7.2 on the Richter scale, and it did a lot of damage. A lot of people died. So we have to be really careful, and this should be a top priority for the local authorities.
Yeah, and you can actually, I mean, if you've never been to Bucharest, I mean, just walking through the city, especially through where some of the older buildings are, you can really see the damage is still there.
You can see the cracks in the facade. Sometimes they have painted over them, but usually a deep crack from so that's earthquake damage will always resurface.
Yeah. Well, how do you think the people? I think a lot of the buildings that were damaged, like pretty heavy during '77, were the new buildings. That weren't so much the older ones, correct?
In 1977, we already had a lot of new buildings, post-war buildings in Bucharest, mainly built in the 60s up till the mid-70s. Those buildings in the 60s, in what we now call, many people call communist districts, that is packed residential areas full of high concrete high-rises where there's a very high density of population.
Your typical, Eastern European social.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's like that meme. Great Scott, we're in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
So basically those buildings also have a lower seismic risk. So in the case of a new, bigger earthquake, larger earthquake, those buildings would surely be affected, but they would not collapse entirely.
They would not collapse.
So
Right.
basically the buildings from the 60s can also be affected, even though we're speaking about higher anti-seismic standards than in the case of the ones from the 30s and 40s.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, they did, yeah. I'm sure they have different building codes and, you know, structures that were.
There was
modern.
a new code issued last
Yeah.
year, actually, and I hope that the real estate developers and those
Yeah.
who actually build in this city will respect these rules, because first and foremost, it's about our lives.
Yeah, yeah.
So the lives of the people living here, living in the buildings, walking by the building when it might collapse. So you can have a lot of collateral victims or damage. So we need to be really careful. And that's why I said this should be one of the top priorities of the current administration.
I agree. I mean, you're talking about a lot of lives, and especially, you know, with the hospitals the way they are now.
Yeah, it's a local issue.
Yeah.
It's a local issue, and you always have to think locally. So locally, but in a globalized context.
Well, what would you do about, you know, the buildings that are already there, that are, you know, populated and people live there? I know in Romania they used bulina roșie, which is like a red thing they put over, you know, the
red
people
dot.
know the red dot, big red dot. I'm sure if you've been here, you've seen it.
Yes, the red dot usually marks a building which is in the first degree of seismic risk. So there's an official list, and if it's first degree, then they have to put this red dot on it, so everyone might know that it's a potentially dangerous building. And actually, there is legislation in place. It's not, of course, it's not fully enforced yet. There is legislation in place, so local authorities can move people in some temporary homes up until their building is consolidated.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yes, so Bucharest City Hall owns some big buildings in Bucharest where they could move people.
Yeah,
but not enough.
Yeah,
so they need to do more. They need to do more on this subject.
One thing I really found fascinating about your account was, you know, I first heard about you before I actually moved here, which was like, I think 4 years ago. But your pictures, I mean, your style of pictures, your eye, did you start taking pictures before you started your account, or your, you know, photography journey, which I consider a photography journal? How did you build your skills as a photographer?
Well, I think I've always enjoyed taking pictures, even back in the 90s when I was a kid, and my mom owned that kind of, you know, very cheap plastic camera with the
I remember those, for sure.
Film with I don't know, 24 or 36 how do you call them, positions or
exposures.
So basically that was my start, and whenever we went on vacation to the mountains or to the seaside, I would try some more artsy frames, etc. And my mom would be like, "What are you doing? We need to take pictures with the family."
See, that's the thing. Like, you never take pictures of people. It's always architecture, correct?
Yes, it's because I've always been fascinated by where we live, the city mainly, and of course Bucharest, because I've spent most of my life here. But you know, portrait photography requires something more, and it's. I like to do stuff really quickly and produce as much content as possible. Yeah. With people, it's a bit harder to do this because you need to be careful. You need to have the proper lighting. You need to first discuss with the people what do you want to do. So basically, a building is just there.
It's not going anywhere.
No. It's unless it collapses. But it's easier. Mm-hmm. And of course, this passion for photography grew even more when I bought my first digital camera back in 2003. And I bought it because I was going on a trip to Belgium representing Romania for a European project. So we were not part of the EU back then. It was a huge deal. So I bought it especially for that trip because I knew we would be stopping in Vienna and Brussels. And of course, I was looking forward to those cities. I had seen pictures from there, and I wanted to take pictures of everything. And halfway to Vienna, I realized that I had forgotten my memory card at home. So I was lucky enough that this camera, it's a no-name company, so I don't even remember the name, so not anything which is widely known. So I was lucky that camera actually had enough memory to put on there like 50 exposures. So it was like basically back in the 90s with being limited by the film.
Well, I remember, the first digital cameras, you had a lot of storage in camera.
It was inbuilt. It was inbuilt, and then of course it got externalized. But then I switched to a small pocket Canon in 2005. And that was very point and shoot. And that's when in 2005, I accelerated my documentation of Bucharest, because it was far easier to take as many pictures as possible and then just download them into my computer. And then I didn't have social media back then, but I had a lot of folders, and I like to show my friends whenever we gathered.
Do you use any of those pictures from them for your current, when you post today? Do you ever bring them back?
Oldest picture I have posted is I think one from 2008, because those in 2005 were still not that good in terms of quality, in terms of resolution.
But I'm sure, a lot has, in the urban landscape, a lot has changed since then.
Yes, some of my pictures have become historic because they are of buildings which have been torn down in the meantime. So
that's great.
So basically now I can do comparisons using my own photos. I don't need to use other historic pictures.
It's an archive.
It's an archive of several thousands of pictures. And then in 2008, I got a Canon PowerShot. It was a bit bulky, but it has a very nice zoom.
It's got a long zoom, like 300 or 400.
Yes, I like to take pictures of details on buildings.
I've noticed that. I mean, I was just walking around the city with you. You point to something, and you're like, "Whoa, how did you see that?"
That's the texture. That's the texture of the city, and that needs to be explored more, because it's not always what you see is what you get. You need to do the hidden gems.
Yeah.
You need to that's the hashtag explore more, or find it, live it. You find this, you enjoy it, you get a certain vibe.
Do you feel like a lot of the and not just the architects, but a lot of people that were paying for the buildings or that lived in the buildings, kind of like they hid certain messages, certain signs? Do you find that?
Depends on the owner of the building, because before World War II, so before the communist regime in Romania, most buildings in Bucharest belonged to private individuals or enterprises. That switched 180 after the war, when the state was the only one building and the state was the largest owner. People should know that the communist regime in Romania did not fully 100% eliminate private property. You could still own a car, you could still own an apartment, you could buy it, so it did not belong to the state.
That's true.
So we need to set things straight. So coming back to your question, yes, it depends. If the person there was a doctor, if the person owning a building was a doctor, then you'd get that serpent symbol from the pharmacy or drugstore. And we have several.
Do you know where that comes from?
I think I've read the legend.
It comes from the Sumerian text. And it's actually, a lot of people say that it actually represents the DNA of the human DNA. Yeah, which is pretty fascinating. If you look at it, it kind of looks like it.
Yes, it's basically a serpent pouring its venom into a cup.
Yeah.
So that's usually here in Romania, and especially in Bucharest, that's pharmacy, that's drugstore, that's the symbol for maybe medicine, something like this. Or if you had an architect, then you'd have some architecture tools represented on the building.
Right.
So it's very interesting, but that's not always the case. Many times the architect opted for some imagery to illustrate on the facade of the building, and it would be dedicated to the owner of the building.
Kind of like a coat of arms, right? Like a family crest or something.
Sometimes they used family crests. Sometimes they used the initials of the owner.
I've seen that.
So name and surname, or first name, last name. So it's very interesting to always guess what went on there. But many ornaments, for example, many facades are done in what's traditional to each respective style. So you have a lot of angels and a lot of flowers for the neoclassical style. You have a lot of archways and very interesting columns for the neo-Romanian style. For example, you have a lot of stylized ornaments and geometric shapes for the Art Deco buildings from the 20s and 30s. So that's how you can set the styles apart.
Yeah. Wow. Also, I mean, as far as your style of, walking about and photographing and, learning about the city or, just learning new things about the city, it seems like it's a very, not a lonely process, but definitely like a solo project when you go out there. But a lot of your business involves, being around other people and showing them and, how do you find that? How do you find that the two, there is a dichotomy between the two?
Well, they can actually coexist because, of course, I do my exploring 99% of the times alone.
Right?
Because that's when I have the time to actually take it in, to actually find some more interesting things, to access some buildings, some maybe an interesting elevator or elevator shaft, maybe an interesting stairway, a nice rooftop view. And maybe more persons would not.
They would attract attention as well.
Yes, and of course, I cannot go with those persons and out in the streets and tell them, look, you're going to be here with me for like 3 hours, and you should cancel everything else you have planned for today. So basically, I do my exploring alone to find the relevant content, and then when I find the relevant content, I either post it, exposing it on social media, or taking people there during my city tours, for example, or during Insta meets, or if I have to talk to the media and we have to do we have to shoot in some locations, we go there and I tell them what I found.
What's the ideal number of people when you do one of your photo walks? Because I know I've done a few of them in my previous, when I was working as a photographer, and found that sometimes if it's more than 8, I think 8 is the max. After that, a lot gets lost. And
with me, there's always been the maximum of 15. 15 is what I find manageable in a city like Bucharest.
Yeah.
And with the buildings which we have in Bucharest, of course, every city has its specific buildings and has a way or a style of being designed. Bucharest is designed in a very chaotic way. Yeah. So you can get lost in the streets, and not necessarily because you don't know how to use Google
Maps. I feel
Maps.
like it's a lot of it is just things built on top of things. You have like
layers.
So many layers, exactly. And it's just like, one road goes like this, like the older road, then you got a new road, and they put a house and a government building right there. It's just, it's a cacophony of
It's a very interesting mix, and you can quote Shrek on that because he said that he was like an onion with layers, and that's the case. That's the case with Bucharest. It has many urban layers because Bucharest is located at the former intersection of big spheres of influence and of the former great empires.
Yeah.
So basically, Bucharest. Let's go back to the 19th century. Bucharest was at the intersection of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire to the west, the German Empire to the north, the Russian Empire to the east, and to the south, the Ottoman or Turkish Empire. So basically, it's a marvel that we were never conquered by any of these empires, and Romania gained its full independence in 1877, 1878. But you can imagine that all these empires and all these populations which migrated through Bucharest left their mark, their cultural mark. So basically, we still have actually some homes with Ottoman influences. Look at some windows; they are called camlık in Turkish. So it's very interesting because you find them in Istanbul, and you say, "Wow, look, there's a connection."
You pointed one out to me. I remember last week, and I was like, "Wow."
Yes, they are very rare because most of them were torn down or modified after the independence.
Yeah.
Because before the independence, we were heavily under the influence of the Ottoman Empire. We actually had to pay a tribute to them in gold coins each year, so they would not invade us, and they didn't always respect this. So basically. That's, let's say, the oldest layer. And even houses from the late 1700s, we have 1 or 2 houses from the 1800s. But then going further into history and coming to
I think one thing also that what you're referring to right now, for the audience that's not familiar, you're referring to Bucharest, like southern Romania. Whereas if you go into, I guess, Transylvania area or Cluj, you really don't see those Turkish influences.
No. That's different because Transylvania which is of course an integral part of Romania, not as some people call it, the country next to Romania. And no, Dracula is not the president of Transylvania. Basically, cities in Transylvania were done by the Austrian-Hungarians. Transylvania became part of Romania after World War I, when the Austrian-Hungarian Empire dissoluted. And Transylvania, because it had a majority of ethnic Romanians, was incorporated into the Greater Romanian Kingdom, as the country was known back then. And it was the best decision to unify all Romanian-speaking peoples and under one state, in one state. It was a political decision, and it was very welcomed by the population. They had worked very hard, years and years for this.
Yeah. But another thing that I've noticed, which is very similar to, I guess, what I would consider to be Turkish design, and which is heavily influenced by Islamic architecture, is a lot of the churches and even older houses have a court, and that's very common in mosques and Islamic style housing. Having a big court in the middle, and then with a garden. It's very interesting.
I don't know if we have that Oriental influence here.
Yeah,
maybe a bit, but the initial courtyards were highly useful, especially in the 19th century, before market economy bloomed in Romania, because you could have vegetables, fruit, or livestock there.
Makes sense.
So basically, you were self-sustained. Mm-hmm. That's up until demand and supply jumped onto the scene towards the 1870s, 1880s, when after the independence, the Romanian state became more and more organized, and market mechanisms were put in place, legislation was issued. So basically, you could go to the market, you could have suppliers, so you didn't need to do everything yourself. Yeah. But this type of courtyards, especially early 19th century courtyards, they were vast, and they basically helped the family.
They're very practical.
Yes, they were super practical. They were not just for like hanging out or sunbathing or whatever. This was never the case in Bucharest. Bucharest was not seen as fun at the time.
Speaking of fun, what's your impression of what's happening with COVID today, with all the restrictions? I'm sure a lot of the work you were doing as far as photo walks and everything like that was kind of put on hold.
Yes, I can say that the pandemic has affected my field of activity heavily, the cultural field of activity especially. And I had to do some changes. For the first time this year, I had 3 online presentations. Mm-hmm. I had never done those before because I like a direct contact with my audience. I like to see people.
It must be difficult, I can imagine.
It is because I'm not the vlogger type. Mm-hmm. That's why.
What were you using, like Zoom or?
No, it was actually Facebook.
Okay.
Facebook Live, because Facebook is still very popular in Romania.
Yeah.
Twitter is not, on the other hand.
I've noticed.
So it's very interesting that
maybe for the best.
Almost no one has a Twitter account in
except
Romania.
For the president. I've seen it.
The president, some politicians, it's to keep in touch and to see what other world leaders are tweeting. So
it's probably not even him tweeting, to be honest.
Well, usually they have in Romania. I know for sure that they have a communications team.
Yeah.
So basically, people in high office, they don't actually do their own communication, which is sometimes more transparent than it should be, and it transpires.
Much different than what's happening in America with Trump. As far as
yes, it's every political leader's decision to do or not do the communications.
For him, it worked. I mean, I feel like,
but Trump has always been a person, a strong, opinionated person. Yeah, so I suppose that's the right style for him.
It's his strength, as far as being a public person and being able to influence. Negatively or positively, but through, social media platform.
Yes.
Yeah, public platform.
But coming back to your question about the pandemic, yes, the cultural sector, which was already underfinanced, so it was not financed enough before the pandemic, is in an even worse state. Mm-hmm. I mean,
is this for Bucharest?
For the whole country.
For the whole country.
Cinema theaters shut down. Theaters shut down with actors not being able to perform. So it has affected this a lot.
The gig industry. Correct?
Yes,
yeah.
of course, that's almost gone. And tourism also.
Yeah.
I used to have many tours, and 99% with foreigners being listed on TripAdvisor and.
Well, I remember I've been on a few with you, and it was mostly foreigners, correct?
Yes, because I prefer. I'm doing some projects for the local population, which is presentations.
Yeah.
But I can't meet with people directly right now. I can do tours, but I prefer these presentations because they help the local population understand more.
Yeah.
Then I do exhibitions, photography exhibitions, or contribute to maybe books or albums, or do all sorts of cultural projects or image-based with all sorts of entities. For example, did one 4 years ago with the Italian embassy, showcasing the Italian influences in Bucharest. And we do have them, from classical Italian influences to fascist architecture from Mussolini's time. So Bucharest is highly diverse, so it's better to
I believe
explore.
Also the largest population of Romanians is in Italy, correct?
Sorry.
The largest population of like the Romanians outside of Romania, I believe it's Italy.
Italy and Spain.
Yeah.
Mainly, but we do have some Italians living in Romania also, and they immigrated here in the 19th century, and there are actually Italian architects who have built a lot of very beautiful buildings in Bucharest. For example, the Vatican Embassy, which is a wonderful palace, was built by an Italian architect, was designed actually. So that was one very nice project. Then I like to do also for the local population Insta meets. So meetings of the local Instagram community, because it's nice to meet the people in 3D and not always just scroll.
We did one of those before.
Double tap. Yes, that's where we met actually. If I remember well, you came to one of my Insta meets that I organized. And it's not my Insta meet; it's the local community Insta meet.
Absolutely.
Because that's what separates me from other so-called influencers, which only push brands forward. I push the city forward, and if brands want to associate and they want to do this project, fine, but it's
very sincere.
Bucharest.
It's very sincere.
It's Bucharest first. Okay.
Right.
So it's very interesting. And then we organized an Insta meet together, and that was actually the Insta meet with the largest participation that I have ever done. There were over 100 people, and that had never happened before.
That was a lot of fun.
I got scared a bit while coming.
Well, you had to go walk with them around the neighborhood.
Yes, and 100 people can actually block streets because you can't scatter them around that much. So it was a bit difficult to handle the group, but it was super nice, and I have very nice and fond memories of that. And of course, you were a very good host.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And
this was for people that don't know. This was at Piazza Spagna Gallery, which was a little project that I did about 3 years ago. But through it, I've met a lot of people. I've had a great time, and one of the things that I really enjoyed about our collaboration together was that this is when I first moved here, but it was an opportunity for me to meet other photographers here in Romania, and everybody just seemed so eager to collaborate, to share their photos. What's your impression about that? Do you find Romania an easy place to collaborate with people?
Yes, because Romanians are highly creative. That's, I think,
this is true.
A general characteristic of this nation.
Yeah. Musically,
whatever,
visually,
in whatever field, if they are given the proper conditions and maybe workspace or work environment, they can produce some very high quality output. Of course, you always have to manage in order to be assured and reassured that that content is produced in a timely manner. So basically, that milestones and deadlines are
one of the problems with artists.
Are respected, especially in the creative field. It's a bit more difficult because creativity doesn't come just like that.
Yeah,
you need time. You need to get into a certain mood in order to create, and I'm sure there are a lot of creative people listening, and they can get on board with this. But yes, it's very easy to collaborate with Romanians in several fields. And I've done collaborations, which I am very, very proud of. All my projects are basically collaborations.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
And I like to gather local talent. And as you know, it's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing who knows a certain type of information.
Yeah.
Because the human mind only goes so far, and you reach a certain age, a certain point where you are saturated with information, and then you need to rely on other people. But the important thing is to have your phone book and your agenda and know whom to call.
Yeah,
it's very important.
Well, this goes back to your point about how you came about to learn about the city was, through somebody else's experience and, and knowledge of the city. And I'm sure that process never ends. It's an ongoing.
It's ongoing, and it's ongoing learning. I mean, I learn something new about Bucharest every day, and I haven't been on each street in Bucharest, so there's still a lot.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite sector? What's your favorite?
Oh wow,
so many, I'm sure.
Well, the fact is, sectors are only Bucharest is divided administratively speaking into 6 sectors, but they are only there to offer a better administration, because the city would be too large to have only one administration.
I understand that was built around the French, the Paris sector system, correct?
Yes, they are called arrondissements in Paris. So here they were always called sectors. And back in the 50s, when we had a lot of Soviet influence, they were called raioane, like they still have in the Republic of Moldova nowadays, for example.
Oh, okay.
That's still an influence which they have there. But in Bucharest, sectors were always, many people translate them to districts, but that would be actually a neighborhood or an area or a quarter.
Yeah.
So you can't say District 1 or District 2 unless...
Maybe that's how I kind of look at it, having, lived in the District of Columbia.
and of course, maybe you love Hunger Games.
Yeah, right? There was another French movie too, District 12 or something.
Yes,
yeah.
Or 9, or I don't know.
Something like that.
Something, yeah, it was good.
Yeah. So yeah, back to COVID. Have you had to kind of adapt? What are some of the challenges you see with what's happening now?
Well, basically, the budgets are slashed or they are non-existent. In January and February, I worked to, let's say, align some projects for the rest of the year. And then in mid-March, lockdown came. Yeah. And then in April for me, April 2020 will always be the month of cancellations. So basically, there was at least one email per day or message canceling a project that I had worked so very hard to align and to prepare, because it was not possible to be done under the current restrictions.
Sure.
So, and it wouldn't be sanitary, of course. So some of them could be postponed for next year, but most of them, 90% I can say, were canceled. And that, of course, impacts my overall financial projections and what I wanted to do with my small business. So maybe do some location scouting, maybe do some more historic research, because these things require some budget.
Has your social media strategy changed at all? Have you had to use different platforms, or use the same platforms but in different ways?
The fact that we were all basically locked up in spring, so I couldn't go exploring. So can you imagine, I was like a lion in a cage.
Oh, man.
I could only go to my local shop where I live. So that was my trip.
That was tough.
And since it's a place where I've lived for a lot of years, it's not interesting anymore. I mean, same buildings, almost the same people. But I had to dig deep into my photo catalog and find some hidden gems and reuse some content and repurpose it. So basically, it was in a sort of way an opportunity for me to just go back, and I had the time to go back and explore what I had created and curate, because there was like this bulk of pictures which I had never gone through. I had only downloaded them, and they were just there lying around. And some of them I did post on social media, and I did a lot of throwbacks.
I noticed that.
I did a lot of throwbacks, because with the lack of activity, we need to remind ourselves that culture is not dead, and cultural projects have always existed, and they will exist. And I've gotten a lot of messages from people that they find hope and inspiration in what I do and in what I share. So that's actually the feedback that I live for, and I'm here for that.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely promote the city like no one else I've seen. And visually, I mean, I'm a photographer, so naturally I was drawn to your account. If you could tell people how they can find these projects that you mentioned.
Well, basically they should check out my Instagram account,
Instagram? Okay.
Bucharest, and I usually, everything I do, I put on there.
And you also have a group on Instagram as well, right? Where people can post and they can tag the group, and then I know I had I think one of my pictures showed up in the group.
It's actually a feature account. That's how you call it. It's called București Realist, Realistic Bucharest. I started the project with a friend of mine, Florin Ioanitsescu, back in early 2013. And the purpose was and still is to show the real side of Bucharest, but the real side is not the bad side. Being realistic is being true to the soul of the city.
Yeah.
I mean, not only showing the beautiful or squeaky clean parts or pretty, or the pretty side, you also have to look at what's going on the edge of Bucharest, in some of the former communist districts, etc. So it's basically a very interesting mix. And I try to feature as many real people there, so not influencers, real people who just take out their phone and document a certain moment. It's a snapshot. It's street photography. It's architecture photography. It's maybe something very moody, maybe something very pastel toned in the Wes Anderson universe, let's say. So basically, it's a mix of everything, but it's a good mix.
Yeah.
It's not, let's say, it doesn't make you dizzy. It makes you more interesting to explore. So it's not tiresome to like browse through.
I like it because it's not mainstream. I mean, it's if this is your first time in Bucharest and you go on one of these trips, I mean, you really get to see
the vibe.
You
get the vibe, and Bucharest is what we can call all the feels. So if you go in different areas of the city, you'll find different vibes. So it's kind of an urban shawarma or kebab. It's like it has everything there.
I normally take my friends that come to visit. I take them to Obor, you know, and I show them that part of Bucharest. You know, we get some meat there. We relax, but also the human experience there is different than it would be if you're here in the center. You know.
Yes, downtown is very different from the let's say residential districts of Bucharest, and Obor is famous because that's where the largest market and outdoor market in Bucharest is.
Like it's a bazaar, like an outdoor.
You can find anything, and from 2015 onward, it started being gentrified, and a lot of hipsters have moved in the area. So now you can find a lot of.
Well, it's a pretty central location as far as it being close to.
Can you imagine?
The center.
Yes, it's close to the city center, but can you imagine that 100 years ago it was on the edge of Bucharest? So that was the limit.
That's crazy.
And when you went past Obor, you were out of the city.
How long has Obor been there?
Obor was incorporated in the city in somewhere between the 30s and the 50s.
Okay, and it was always like a, I guess, lack of a better term, Oriental style bazaar, or like I don't even know how to call it.
Yes, it's always been like this with open air commerce, and with local producers coming there to sell their merchandise. So it's always been like that. But of course, technology changes, and basically. There was an older market hall, and then it got replaced with the current one. The current one is one of the largest and most beautiful modernist projects in Bucharest. It was a project done in, they did the project theoretically in the 1930s, so the plans were ready. But then the Second World War came, and they could only finish it after the war. So I think it was ready by the end of the 40s. When that was the early onset of the communist regime in Romania.
One thing that I've noticed looking at some of the older archival footage of Bucharest, it's how high class, how the people used to always dress up, but it was Eastern. Like some of them had Ottoman style dress, but some were dressed in suits with a cane, and they had the tramvai on Calea Victoria, I believe they had one, right? No.
No, I don't think there was ever a tram on Calea Victoria, but it was on the Elisabeta Avenue. Okay. The one intersecting Calea Victoria.
With all the shops up front. I look very, very bougie, very high class, very something that, me growing up here I left Romania when I was 9. I remember seeing those during the communist era, and it was just completely, it's day and night difference in the archival footage.
Well, it also depends what pictures you are looking at, because most of the pictures in 1930s Bucharest, that's considered the golden age
The golden age, right.
of Bucharest.
I believe they used to call it like little Paris, right?
That was back in the early 1900s when neoclassical architecture of French inspiration had picked up. And then, of course, you had a lot of stuff resembling France. So that's where you have it, Little Paris, or Paris of the East. But that's a nickname that Bucharesters at the time actually hated. I've read some magazines and there were opinion polls and they hated that. They said, no, we are original. We don't imitate. I mean, we may get inspired, but we adapt it. We customize it. That's what they said back in the day. But back in the 30s, yes, but that was the usual day attire for the regular people. I mean, men were expected to wear suits and ties and hats, and women were expected to dress in an elegant manner.
Did you ever see yourself traveling in time?
Well, yes, I do this on my presentations, which are called the Time Machine. So yes, I actually traveled in time.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the Time Machine presentations originated in 2012. Then I really started working on them and calibrating a very nice experience for the audience in 2014. So that's when the current iteration of the project started, and I'm now on episode 12, actually preparing episode 13.
That's awesome.
I was supposed to launch episode 13 in October, and then the current restrictions were put in place, so I couldn't do that anymore.
Do you post this on your own account, or how can people find the
I always announce it on all my social media, on Facebook or on Instagram, that I have this presentation coming, and they can either sign up or just show up there. Before the pandemic, I didn't do registrations, so they could they could just come over and experience the Time Machine. But whilst when we reopen a bit, I suppose it's going to be via registration. But what's the Time Machine? What's the concept? The concept is that I take older pictures of Bucharest from all eras, 19th century, 20th century, monarchy, communism, whatever, current era, 1990s, or even early 2000s, and I redo the same angle, the same frame today. And then through a very small crossfade, we see what has changed and what are the reasons behind the change, because Bucharest has changed dramatically, massively. There are a few places in Bucharest which have remained the same. Bucharest is a city of change. It's very organic, and
it's alive.
Yes, it's alive, and only people living here can actually understand what I'm talking about. That even this street corner used to look different 15 years ago, and it's ever changing.
I mean, the street names too. I mean, there's so many new street names now after the post-communism.
And that's because every regime tries to impose their own agenda. And of course, there were original street names from the 19th century, which were changed in the early 20th century to align it to the regime that was back in the Conservative Party days. And then after World War II, communists eliminated every street name, even remotely connected to the former royal family or former regime. And the current regime eliminated everything remotely connected to communism. So it's
I'm starting to believe that's part of the human condition. I mean, just looking at what's happening in America today with tearing down, statues. And,
but it's not in that sense.
It's not.
It's not in that sense. So, and I wouldn't compare it, because some changes were necessary. Street names in Bucharest, of course, some changes were surprising to say the least. But all in all, through what I do, I try to give people perspective and say, okay, this is what we have now, but look how we got here. Look at all the stages. Look at all the intermediary phases. So basically, that's very important for me, and that's urban anthropology, and that's directly linked to what I do, urban storytelling. I'm explaining to you what this place used to be, who changed it, what changed it, how it became what we know.
Do you see yourself as sometimes as kind of stepping into that period of time, that era, when you're walking, on your own, or just looking around? Do you just kind of sometimes just go into that mind state?
That's a very interesting perspective. I actually have a collapse perspective. That means all eras collapse into a frame. it's like having the maximum zoom, and you have all the frames in one, all the background, foreground, whatever. You have them in one frame. That's it for me. So I don't see myself going back into.
You're kind of the final iteration, the
yes,
everything led up to.
So it's more of a complex perspective. If I through what I've learned and through what I've seen in archival footage, when I look at a place in Bucharest, I usually tend to see all the former eras that or how they looked with that place at the center. So I don't actually think of myself as traveling to only one era, traveling to all of them.
So you're a true time explorer. Yeah.
Time traveler. Maybe I am, who knows?
That's awesome. What about other cities, other countries? Do you have the same enthusiasm when you go to a new city?
Oh yes, I'm actually quite interested in seeing the urban planning and how they are doing it. And I always, my friends are like, why are you taking pictures of the sidewalk? Why are you taking pictures of the lamppost? There's a nice building here. And okay, we'll take pictures of that, but I need this because I need to compare it with Bucharest and to see, just to benchmark, not necessarily do a true comparison, because the styles are different, the background is different, the history of the people living there is different. So there's not much to compare, but good practices should always be inspiring to others.
Have you met anybody else who does what you do in other countries?
Yes, actually. Whenever I used to go until the pandemic to other countries, I identified local urban explorers and got in touch with them. So we went out shooting, or they would show me hidden places in the city.
That's so cool. Yeah.
So most recent one, shout out to Milos in Belgrade. So it's because I know he's also on Instagram and he does great stuff with exploring Belgrade.
So Cristi, when people, I'm sure there's other people out there that are watching this or like are following you, and they kind of want to know where to start. Any advice you can give these people?
We'll get to the advice part, but first, how it started for me. I was in my high school years, early 2000s, and I started going out more into the downtown. Because I lived in a former communist district, so an area which had not been part of the downtown before World War II. So it was developed in the post-war period. So I used to go downtown, and the city looked so much different. It was like traveling to another city. So I started to ask myself questions. What is this building? What is this architectural style? I don't know this. And back then, the Romanian internet was nothing. So basically, I couldn't find information. And of course, I was preparing for my exams and going to university, and I didn't have time to actually study or get into that, not even as a hobby. And the question was there in the back of my head. Then I saw the parliament. We have the largest parliament building in the world here. And I
it's
said,
the second biggest structure in the world, I believe, right?
After the Pentagon.
After the Pentagon.
In the US, in terms of expanding on the land and how much land it occupies, the surface. And then I wondered, well, it looks neoclassical, but I heard it's from the 80s. So why? So I started asking myself all these questions when walking in the streets. And I think the main advice would be to never stop exploring and always be curious, always challenge the status quo, and always ask questions.
That's great advice.
Because if you prefer to just sit there and just observe and say nothing, then saying nothing will trigger doing nothing.
Yeah, it won't lead you down that path.
Yes, so it's always good to communicate. It's always good to maybe, I don't know if it's the right term, use the others to help you, use their knowledge to help you advance a bit.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. That's why I asked around. I was relentless in finding information. And then when you learn enough information, you feel that you need to share that information. So
as we talked earlier about the transfer of human experience and information.
Yes, so first of all, it's very kind to do so. And being kind will always be in fashion, from my point of view. And
Just be nice.
Just be kind, rewind. But that's not the case because VCRs are not in fashion anymore.
Oh, you said rewind. I totally missed that one.
That's what they said. Be kind, rewind, because we rented out video cassettes.
I totally forgot about that.
And then when I took them back, the person at the counter would be like, "Did you rewind this?"
Oh, come on! But they had that machine where they would just put it in there, like, doop.
Yes, but they were too lazy.
Yeah.
So so that's it. But yes, it's very important to just never give up on an initiative or a project. I won't say dream, because that's very aspirational and that's very big style. And I'm not Lady Gaga, for example. But
dreams are also, I feel like you get too. I don't want to say limited, but you're too focused on one thing. And if you don't get to that place where you want it to get, then you might feel, little kind of let down, because, hey, I didn't, but I think each day, if each day you do something more towards, it's the journey. It's the journey, the process of the journey, rather than where you're going to end up, correct?
Of course, it's all about the journey, not necessarily the destination. I'm not at my destination yet. I'm still on my journey.
Who is? Right?
I don't know what. I don't know.
Death, maybe.
I won't say. Well, death and taxes are inevitable in this lifetime, but that's a recurring joke from my mother's generation. But going back to what advice I can give people is also to set up a network.
Yeah.
Find people with similar interests, or find people who are willing to fund or support your interest through any means necessary. Even a share on Facebook. A share goes a long way, because that person has a small community around him or her. So they can basically speak about what you are doing, and other people can get in touch with you and your content and your aspirations for doing more. And they say, "Oh, wait, we can collaborate. I want to do that too." So that's happened to me a lot of times, and I've usually I don't refuse collaborations, but they really have to be aligned to what I want to do.
Yeah.
So basically, I will never do collabs for cosmetics or whatever, because that's not my field of activity. That doesn't mean that people who are into lifestyle and cosmetics, for example, aren't doing their thing.
Yeah.
So there are some great lifestyle influencers which people can find and can get inspired by them. But with my cultural field, it's essential to have a network.
Yeah.
And I have groups of people whom I talk to, subject matter experts. So because I'm not an architect, I'm not an urban planner, not a historian, but
you're kind of all three of those a little bit.
I take bits from everywhere, and I still find the passion, because it's still part job, part hobby, but mostly job nowadays.
It's a passion that you're making a living from. So.
Yes, so I try. I try my best every day.
I think that's the best thing you can do in life.
And
it gives you the most freedom.
I think another thing I could point out is whoever wants to start something similar is never give up, because many people will cut you down. Many people will say you're not good enough, you can't do this, you're not allowed to do this, or
including yourself.
You're too young to do this. Sometimes as a recent song says, my biggest enemy is me. So sometimes we are our greatest enemies, and I
wouldn't say so much enemy. I would say more we are our biggest critics, but sometimes that criticism really helps. I find it that, if you do just receive praise all the time, you're not really evolving as an artist or as a storyteller or as a photographer. One thing I could say, as far as the photography aspect of what you do, when I carry a camera with me, so if I carry a camera with me and it's in my backpack and I'm walking down the street, but if that same camera, if I have it in my hands or around my neck, not even around my shoulder, but just around my neck or my hands, my experience walking through the city is completely different. I'm always looking for something. I'm much more in tune, much more like hyper aware of what's going on around me, how the shadows are falling, how the architecture, how I can use that. For me, I think of more like, other elements such as the people, subjects, but I'm sure when you have your camera with you, it's not just a phone, right? Because everybody has a phone, so you're used to walking around with a phone. But when you have your camera in your hand and you're doing this, you know, walking through the city, I'm sure you're hyper aware, and that helps tremendously.
Oh yes, it gives you more like a 360 perspective, because you tend to look around and tend to look for interesting details, if you want, like shadows, like ornaments on a building, like people, even people in the streets. When you have the long shadows at sunrise or sunset, very good vibes. But the main thing is, as you said before, we should always be our greatest critics, but maybe not too harsh on ourselves. And maybe also thrive on some feedback. It's if you're doing something that impacts the public in any way, feedback is important.
Yeah.
Because you may have a warped perspective on what you want to do. And it's happened to me during some, when I was doing some projects and I said, oh, it's like this. And then the general audience said, no, it's the other way around. And I learned from that, because we may like some things, but the general audience, or the final consumer, if you want, of this content may not think so. Mm-hmm. So you need to also be connected to the audience, and that's why I always respond to people who give me feedback on Instagram. I receive a lot of messages, even if they are just reactions to some stories. I appreciate people, because that was 1 second of their lifetime that they dedicated to me, to sending a message my way.
See, that's a different kind of feedback, though, than, say, for example, how many views or how many likes, because that could be very disingenuous as far as...
especially with the current, let's speak about Instagram. With the current Instagram algorithm, that's not always feedback in its truest form. Feedback in its truest form is the direct feedback.
Like a message.
You have the direct messages.
Yeah.
The fact that a person would do that, a person whom you've never met, or I've never met, would do so. And I communicate with people from all around the world, from New York to Japan, from Moscow to Athens. So it's like the whole world there. And it's something that, and I'm very grateful for it. And I'm very grateful that I've managed, from 2015, when I started my Instagram account, up till now, I managed to gather almost 25,000 followers on my account organically. I have never invested any money in buying followers or promoting my posts. I built my account organically, only with great content. So that's
consistent content,
consistency and quality.
Yeah,
that's highly essential. And of course, sticking to a theme or two. Mm-hmm. And my theme being the urban theme, and of course with certain variations. And maybe once every 10 posts, I may insert myself in a frame, and just to show my face, because it's also important to show the face, because we are humans. Yeah. That's the connection. And the connection is a bit more difficult on social media, because you're not talking directly to 100%. The person. You interact with their content first, and of course you can do a video call and you can do whatever, but first contact is with the content. So that's what I learned in my time on Instagram till now. Second, I got a lot of collabs on Instagram just based on my content, and some of them have been absolutely amazing. For example, with the Jameson Irish whiskey. So they
shout out to Jameson.
Yes, it's a very fine whiskey. I always enjoy drinking it like that, or in some cocktails. But the people here working for Jameson in Romania, they came to me and they said, look, we want to get you as a, let's say maybe wannabe ambassador or something like this. And
a brand ambassador.
And not quite a brand ambassador, but I at the time I was wearing a lot of lumberjack type shirts, and I had a larger beard than I display nowadays. But with wearing masks, it's highly unpractical.
Tell me about it.
I used to love my beard, but right now I needed to trim it down because it's horrible. But still, but wearing a mask is very important these days. So I will encourage it. That's basically.
You briefly mentioned the new Instagram algorithm. What do you mean by that?
The new Instagram algorithm basically means that when you post something, not everyone that follows you sees it in their feed. Instagram is now owned by Facebook, so they are slowly moving towards what they did with Facebook some years ago. So they are showing only posts from people who you frequently interact with in your feed, and that's not fair. That's not fair because maybe you don't have time to interact with everyone.
Sure.
When
you say interact, are you referring to like sending a like or
commenting, liking, etc.? So, and they have switched the order of gaining exposure. Back in some years ago, 2015, 2016, you got exposure if people liked your post or commented on it. Now they have to save it and send it in direct messages to like 10, 20 people.
Wow.
Because that means engagement, and that means that they like the post sufficiently to send it privately to other individuals. So basically, liking and commenting on a post is not enough anymore, and it won't save the content from failing. Not failing because it's weak content, but failing because it won't reach as many people as possible. And sometimes I get frustrated by this because I'm really excited about a photo and I really want people to actually see that and I want their feedback. And people are asking me, wait, did you post today? I didn't see anything in my feed. So I did this experiment like 2 years ago. I was around the table with 5 friends. So there are 5 people. And I said, look, I'm going to post something right now. And each of you will look and will tell me if my post has showed up in real time in your feed. And it was 50-50.
Wow.
2 people saw it immediately.
Yeah.
And 2 people only saw it a few hours after.
Did you figure out why? Or
the algorithm. Because it deprioritizes organic accounts. And because they want money, and nowadays they are moving towards video to compete.
So those people
with TikTok,
the people that appear in the feed, they actually send it through a DM, correct? The picture.
I know it's strictly purely observational and speaking because I'm connected to other Instagrammers or what could be called influencers from all around the world, and I ask them, look, what's going on?
Trying to find the pattern and what's happening.
A pattern, and this is a pattern. But of course, Instagram has never confirmed this, nor have they confirmed the existence of shadow banning.
Which we all know that
shadow banning. It's basically you affiliate your post to a hashtag, and apart from yourself, no one else sees the post on the hashtag. Whilst hashtags are collapsed galleries, and you should be able to gain
that's a big problem.
A lot of visibility through affiliating your post to that hashtag.
Absolutely. What's your views on the future? Like, where's this going as far as like, if the algorithms keeps changing, if the business model keeps changing? What is this going towards a more select group of people being able to market themselves better than just that person that is doing organically and is doing what you're doing?
Yes, I think that's what they are going for, to earn more money and to only be an influencer platform. And what will happen in the future is that regular people who just enjoy content and
will be bombarded with, No,
they will leave the platform, and it will be like Facebook. Facebook has seen a generational transition. For example, 10 years ago, my generation, so millennials, were mostly on Facebook. Now, middle-aged people, or maybe from what they call the boomer generation, are on Facebook mostly, whilst millennials tend to concentrate more on Instagram and Insta stories, and Generation Z, so the ones coming after the millennials, are on TikTok. So basically, that's the current outlook, and it's this migration. So the next best thing that maybe hasn't been invented yet, hasn't been launched yet.
I can't even imagine.
We'll see what the
after TikTok. What's next?
We'll see. Yeah, that's scary a bit. But we'll see what the next best thing is, because Instagram at a certain point will stop working for original content creators. I mean, if you have let's say, for example, 100,000 people, and you get 300 likes per post organically, then you do the math and see that the reach is super low. Super low. And it's not about you, it's about the platform. Because back in my early Instagram days, I could post basically anything and it would reach, because everyone...
And it was even in chronological order back then, I remember.
Yes, everyone, bring back the chronological feed. Everyone saw what I was posting. So, and it was amazing.
That was the best. It's my opinion as well that was the best. You know, I mean, the most fair, but also the best. It's what I wanted. It's the chronological feed is what I wanted.
Instagram in its initial iteration was
before Facebook.
Far better than what it stands for now. But back in those days, they also did Instagram features, and basically they could feature accounts, and many accounts, and I know some accounts in Romania, some people grew a lot to those features, but they featured content. And so it was real content. It was praising real content creators, which nowadays they did a full 180 and they are disregarding us, promoting influencers and all sorts of, weak content, which unless you're into that, and it's all right, because there should be enough for everyone. It
kind of speaks a lot to people's attention and, you know, the attention span. I mean,
the attention span has shrunken to like an all-time low.
Yeah. But, you know, building on top of that, you can also say that if you wanted to have, let's say, 1 million followers or friends, as they call them on Facebook, it could take you years. Say you're doing all the right things. On Instagram, it would be months. On TikTok, it could happen overnight.
I'm sorry, months for what on Instagram?
On Instagram to get, let's say, 1 million, not months, it's years. But it's significantly shorter than what Facebook would be.
Well, of course, but Instagram is also, so I'm getting messages on a regular basis from people asking me, oh my God, how did you get to that follower count? And it's like 25,000 followers. It's nice, but it's not the highest.
Yeah. My point though is like each platform seems like that process becomes faster and faster. Like for example, you know, going back to the attention span, TikTok, when you open the application, you know, people are already dancing. It's already happening.
It's very dynamic.
Yeah.
It's very dynamic. It's very.
It pulls you in instantly.
Yes, it's very eye-catching, and I suppose that's what makes it great. Plus, the reach there is amazing. It's like Instagram in its early days, so that's why more people are migrating towards TikTok. But with the sort of content that I'm producing, it's a bit more difficult to adjust and to adapt it to that type of platform. I haven't given up on the idea. I'm still thinking about how to calibrate and how to come up with some good TikTok content. I'm not doing dances. I'm not singing. So it's with the cultural field, you always have to make culture more appealing, because many people consider culture to be boring. But if you give it the right twist, then it becomes much more appealing and much more consumable.
You're still part of culture, even if you have that viewpoint. You still belong to a culture. You're still immersed by a culture.
You're always part of a culture, an underground culture, a counterculture, whatever, but you're still part of it. So
people, you know, somebody like you 100 years from now will be talking about us, right?
Yes,
hopefully.
100 years from now, I'm going to remember this discussion.
Oh man,
and I'll say those.
That's heavy.
Those were the days.
That's heavy, yeah. Well, we don't know where it's going, do we?
No. Yeah. It's a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
Ups and downs galore.
Yeah. I'm hopeful we'll come out of this and, you know, we can meet up again and do another meet.
Oh, I wish so badly to go back to my tours, back to my presentations, to basically have my activities. And in the meantime, I'll try to adapt.
Okay.
Right now, I'm concentrating on really picking up the pace with a t-shirt brand.
Tell us if you have any projects coming up that you want to share.
My current new project is one that I'm working on. I've been working on it like all the year long. It should have been launched in early summer, but due to the lockdown, everything got delayed. But I'm happy we did manage at the end of the summer to launch it. It's called Typography Bucharest, and it deals with just making you wear the city. So myself and my team, we defined a new style, let's call it. We say neo-retro. And neo-retro means that we take old logos, old letterheads, old shop signs, which are still visible in the city and have not been taken down yet. And we integrate them into a utilitarian design, a minimalistic design, thereby resulting that the retro vibe has been impacted by the newer vibe. So we have neo retro.
Right.
That's how we define our brand, our t-shirt brand, neo retro t-shirts with the self-indulging, nostalgic aesthetic.
Okay.
Because it's very appealing. Some generations know about these. Some generations are
I'm sure if you're walking down the street with something like that, and somebody that is familiar with it, that might be in their 70s or 80s, right?
Not necessarily, even people who are like 50 or 60 today, so still active people actually know them, because we take a lot of inspiration from the styles of the 70s and of the 80s in Bucharest, in what was 3D lettering and what the regime back then, how it defined the shop signs, because they all belonged to the state. So basically we make them wearable, and we've gotten a lot of very positive feedback. Just today on Antena 1. So during their morning show, there was a very special piece on Typography Bucharest, and it aired today. And I'm
a big fan of typography.
Very happy about that. We try to do everything with style, and we try to address as many people as possible, because you can, if you're a hipster or maybe a teenager, or you're in your 20s, you surely love vintage or retro, and this is reinterpreted. So this is not just printing a picture on a t-shirt. And right now we are working on some very special and limited editions, and you're the first one. I said it here first. 1st of December. 1st of December, it's Romania's National Day. So we are working and are ready, in fact, to launch a limited edition t-shirt, which will be available, I don't know, starting maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
Okay.
We'll announce it. And of course,
and this is on your website on the.
So on Facebook it's Typography Bucharest. On Instagram it's Typography Bucharest. So anyone who's interested, they should go there, and they should. And we're waiting for them. Ask questions in the DMs, whatever. Comment. It's our t-shirts are 100% cotton, so they are super nice to wear in all seasons, during all seasons. And 2 more special editions coming at the end of the year for Christmas and for New Year's Eve, because we are going to have Christmas and the New Year's Eve at home, because we can't go to parties. It's going to be difficult, but we want to make things easier for people, and just to have as much fun as possible at home, or even having a glass of champagne on New Year's Eve on Zoom. But dressed in an appropriate t-shirt, and we are working on that, and it's big fun for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, and if people want to tag you for, what are some of the tags that people should use if you want, in order for you to see their work?
It's hashtag București Realist.
Okay.
But without the diacritics.
Right. So it's like a mix of, right.
Yeah, so it's I check that hashtag out on an almost daily basis.
That's great.
When I have the time, and that's where I get that's where I select features for my feature account.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, if they see any typography or any signs that they like, they should just put hashtag Typography Bucharest, and we're also looking on that.
Typography Bucharest.
And usually we're sharing stories and posts related to typography on that account, because it's a dual account. So it's also business and, of course, clothing or apparel, whatever you like to call it, but it's also cultural and discovery. So we have discovery posts, as we call them, with new fonts, new 3D fonts, which we find in the city, and people can vote. People can tell us if they like it, and if something is super popular, then we'll probably produce a T-shirt, incorporating that visual in our neo-retro aesthetic. So we'll have to see. It's basically collaborating with the people and knowing what our audience wants. And we're slowly but steadily building up that audience. I'm very happy with how the project is going, and it will be even better. We are currently working on our own website, because right now we function in a marketplace by Printoteca. They are the ones who actually produce the t-shirts. They print them and they ship them. And this, of course, will be available on our website pretty soon. And of course, with being able to explore the products and see the designs up close and see how models wear them or how regular people wear them. So it will be very interactive.
Yeah, that's cool. I like the part that you're you're actually sharing other photographers' stories and work, because that does really help get their work out and have people see it.
Well, what goes around comes around.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think any photographer would be there without, somebody else's help or in any domain, really.
Exactly, because being indifferent is the worst.
Yeah.
I mean, at least love it or hate it, but don't be indifferent. Don't just
stand out the way.
Being indifferent is like leaving a person on scene.
Yeah.
Either.
yeah, that could break hearts. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. Oh, yes. That scene sign has
or the little, what is it now? The little blue check mark, right?
Yes. It's either on WhatsApp or on Instagram or even on Facebook Messenger.
Well, it was a pleasure talking to you today, Cristi, and hope we do this again. Maybe we'll do it in Romania the next time.
Well, of course, sure.
Yeah.
I'm always open to talk to you, to talk to your audience, and we also have so much fun when we meet up and to talk about all sorts of things. And I really enjoy talking to you, and thank you for the awesome questions. I mean, they hit the spot.
My pleasure. And we're gonna put everything in the links, all the information about where the people can find you, and that's about it, folks. Thanks.